The dust storm hit Del Rio, Texas, just as Penelope Dawson opened her door to find a woman collapsed on her porch. 3 shivering children huddled beside her like frightened rabbits. Penelope did not hesitate. She hauled the woman inside, her own thin arms trembling with the effort, and gathered the children quickly before the wind could sweep them away like tumbleweeds. The youngest could not have been more than 4 years old, her face streaked with dried tears and red dust. The woman was burning with fever, her lips cracked and bleeding, mumbling words Penelope could not understand. Through the half-open door, Penelope glimpsed an overturned wagon about 50 yards down the road, one wheel still spinning slowly in the wind. "Mama," the oldest child whispered, a boy of perhaps 10. "Is Mama going to die?" Penelope knelt beside them, her calico dress pooling around her knees. "Not if I can help it. What are your names?" "I am Thomas. This is my sister Mary, and the little one is Sarah." Penelope nodded and moved quickly. She had been rationing her own supplies for weeks, ever since the drought had driven up prices and made every scrap of food precious as gold. Her cupboard held only what she needed to survive until her next payment from Mrs. Henderson, whose laundry she took in twice weekly. But looking at those hollow cheeks and desperate eyes, Penelope made her choice in a heartbeat. She pulled out her last jar of preserves, the cornmeal she had been saving, the dried beef she had planned to make last another week. She boiled water from her dwindling supply and made a thin gruel, coaxing spoonfuls into the woman's mouth while the children ate ravenously. She tore strips from her second dress, the one she had been saving for church, and used them to cool the fever. Through the night she worked, while the storm howled outside and threw sand against the windows like angry fists. By morning, the woman's fever had broken. Her name was Catherine Miller, and she wept when she saw what Penelope had done. "You have given us everything," she said, her voice hoarse. "How will you eat?" "I will manage," Penelope said, though she had no idea how. Her cupboard stood empty, the shelves bare as bones. "You needed help. That is all that matters." Catherine and her children had been traveling to San Antonio to join her brother after her husband died of cholera 3 months prior. Their guide had abandoned them 2 days ago, taking their money and leaving them with a broken wagon and no supplies. "I thought we would die out there," Catherine whispered. "Then I saw your light in the window." Penelope helped them for 3 more days, sharing her bed, her water, everything she had. On the 4th day, a supply wagon arrived to take Catherine and her children to San Antonio. Catherine pressed a small silver locket into Penelope's palm. "It was my mother's. It is all I have to give you." "You do not need to give me anything," Penelope said, but Catherine closed her fingers around it. "You saved our lives. I will never forget you." After they left, Penelope sat in her small house and stared at her empty cupboard. She had 4 cents to her name and no food. Mrs. Henderson's laundry would not be ready for another 5 days. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but she did not regret her choice. She could not have done otherwise. That evening, as the sun painted the sky crimson and gold, Penelope heard the sound of a horse outside. She looked through the window and saw a man dismounting, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dusty trail coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. He was leading a pack mule loaded with supplies. Penelope opened the door cautiously. The man removed his hat, revealing dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked to be in his middle 20s with a strong jaw and sun-weathered skin. "Miss Dawson?" "Yes, my name is Zachary Rains. I met the Miller family on the road. Mrs. Miller told me what you did for them." He gestured to the mule. "I have brought you some supplies." Penelope blinked. "I do not understand. Why would you do that?" Zachary's expression remained serious, almost stern. "Because you emptied your cupboard for strangers. That kind of kindness should not go unrewarded. He began unloading the mule, carrying sacks and parcels into her house before she could protest. Flour, cornmeal, coffee, sugar, dried beans, salt pork, canned peaches, and more. He filled her cupboard methodically, his movements efficient and unhurried. "Sir, I cannot accept all this. I have no way to pay you. I am not asking for payment." He continued working, stacking supplies with careful precision. "Mrs. Miller said you gave them everything." "I am just balancing the scales." Penelope watched him, stunned into silence. In Del Rio, people looked after their own, but strangers rarely helped strangers without expecting something in return. "Are you a religious man, Mr. Raines? Is this charity?" He glanced at her, and something flickered in those gray eyes. "I am not much for church, Miss Dawson. But I know good people when I hear about them, and good people should not go hungry for doing what is right." When he finished, her cupboard was fuller than it had been in months. Zachary picked up his hat and moved toward the door. Penelope found herself speaking before she could think better of it. "Would you like some coffee? It seems the least I can do since you have just given me so much of it." He paused, turning back to her. "I would not want to impose." "You have just saved me from starvation, Mr. Raines. You could hardly impose now." A hint of a smile touched his mouth, the first break in his serious demeanor. "Then yes, Miss Dawson, I would like that." Penelope made coffee, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. She was acutely aware of him sitting at her small table, his presence filling the room in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size. She set a cup before him and took her own seat across the table. "You are not from Del Rio," she said. It was not a question. "No, madam. I have a ranch about 15 miles west of here. I was bringing cattle to market when I met the Millers. And you just decided to turn around and bring me supplies. I went to the general store first, bought what I thought you would need, then came here." He sipped his coffee, his gaze steady on her face. "Mrs. Miller said you gave them your last food, that you tore up your own dress to help with her fever. She said you sat up all night caring for her children." Penelope looked down at her cup. "Anyone would have done the same." "No, Miss Dawson. Most people would not have." His voice was quiet but firm. "Most people would have shut their door against the storm and told themselves it was not their problem. I could not do that, I know. That is why I came." They talked as the evening deepened into night. Penelope learned that Zachary had built his ranch from nothing over the past 5 years, working as a trail hand and saving every cent until he could buy his own land. He ran cattle and broke horses, living alone except for 2 Mexican ranch hands who helped during roundup season. He was 26 years old and had come to Texas from Missouri after the war ended when he was just a boy. "My father died at Shiloh," he said, staring into his coffee. "My mother passed 2 years later. I had nothing keeping me there, so I came west." "I am sorry," Penelope said softly. He shrugged. "It was a long time ago. What about you? How did you end up in Del Rio?" Penelope told him about her own journey. Her parents had died of influenza when she was 17, leaving her orphaned and alone in Missouri. Her father's debts had consumed everything they owned. A distant cousin had offered her a place to stay in Del Rio, but when she arrived, she discovered the cousin had moved to California. "I had just enough money for a month's rent on this house. I found work taking in laundry and doing mending. That was 3 years ago." "You have been here alone for 3 years." Something in his voice made her look up. "I have managed. I do not need much." "Clearly," he said, and there was no judgment in the word, only respect. When he finally stood to leave, Penelope walked him to the door. The night air was cool and sweet, the storm's fury completely spent. Zachary settled his hat on his head and looked down at her. "Thank you for the coffee, Miss Dawson. Thank you for the kindness, Mr. Raines. I truly do not know how to repay you." There is no debt." He mounted his horse with easy grace. "But if you would not mind, I might come by again, to make sure you are doing all right." Penelope felt her heart skip in an unfamiliar way. "I would not mind that at all." He touched the brim of his hat and rode off into the darkness, and Penelope stood watching until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Zachary came back 3 days later with a wagon wheel, the same size as the one on Penelope's small cart that had cracked the previous month. He installed it without being asked, kneeling in the dust and working with quiet concentration while she watched from the doorway. "How did you know my wheel was broken?" she asked. "I noticed it the other night." He tested the wheel, spinning it to make sure it was secure. "Figured you might need a new one. Mr. Rains, you have already done so much." "It is just a wheel, Miss Dawson. I had a spare." But it was not just a wheel, and they both knew it. It was attention. It was care. It was noticing what she needed before she had to ask. He stayed for supper that night, and Penelope made corn cakes and beans with the supplies he had brought her. They ate at her small table, and conversation came easier than before. Zachary told her stories about his ranch, about the ornery bull that had chased him up a tree last month, about the wild mustangs he had seen running along the river. Penelope told him about Mrs. Henderson's scandalous new hat with 3 entire birds on it, about the traveling preacher who had come through town claiming he could cure any ailment with prayer and $1. "Did anyone give him money?" Zachary asked. "Half the town, including Mr. Peterson, who swore his rheumatism was cured." Of course, the next day he was complaining about it again, but by then the preacher was long gone. Zachary shook his head, but he was smiling, and Penelope realized she liked making him smile. His whole face changed, becoming younger and more open. When he left that night, he said, "I will be back next week if that is all right with you." "I will be here," Penelope said, and she spent the next 7 days thinking about him far more than she should. He came every week after that, sometimes twice a week if his work allowed it. He never arrived empty-handed. Fresh vegetables from his garden, a chicken that had stopped laying eggs but would make good soup, a book he had finished reading, thinking she might enjoy it. He never made a fuss about these gifts, just presented them casually, as if they were nothing at all. Penelope began to look forward to his visits with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. She had been alone for so long, relying only on herself, never expecting anything from anyone. But Zachary made her feel something she had almost forgotten: hope. One evening in late September, after they had finished supper and were sitting on her small porch watching the sun set, Zachary said, "I have been thinking about hiring someone to help at the ranch. Someone to handle the house, do the cooking and such. The bunkhouse is separate from the main house, so it would be proper. I would pay wages, of course." Penelope turned to look at him. His face was carefully neutral, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Rains?" "I am, if you are interested. I know you have your laundry work here, but I thought maybe." He trailed off, then met her eyes directly. "I would like to see you more often, Miss Dawson." This is the best reason I could come up with that would not be entirely improper. Her heart hammered in her chest. What if I said I would like to see you more often too? Something fierce and glad blazed in his eyes. Then maybe we could stop pretending this is just about kindness and good deeds. What is it about then? You know what it is about, Penelope. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice made her shiver. "I have known since the first night I met you. Since I heard what you did for those strangers, giving everything you had without a second thought. You are the finest person I have ever met, and I want to be near you." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. "I am not that special, Zachary. I just did what anyone should do, but they do not." That is what makes you extraordinary." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip gentle but sure. "Will you come work at my ranch? Will you let me court you properly?" "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to both." He brought her to his ranch the following week, driving her and her few belongings in his wagon. The land was beautiful, rolling hills covered in brown grass, clusters of live oaks providing shade, a clear creek running through the eastern pasture. The house was simple but well built, larger than she expected, with real glass windows and a stone fireplace. The kitchen was spacious, and the separate bedroom he showed her was clean and bright. "The bunkhouse is about 100 yards that way," he said, pointing. "Manuel and Jose stay there during roundup season, but they have gone home to their families now. They will be back in the spring." "It is beautiful here," Penelope said honestly. "It is better now that you are here," Zachary replied, and she felt her cheeks warm. She fell into the rhythm of ranch life quickly. She cooked and cleaned, tended the vegetable garden, fed the chickens Zachary bought for her. But more than the work, she loved the time they spent together. Zachary taught her to ride, placing her on his gentlest mare and walking beside her until she found her confidence. They rode out to check on the cattle, and he showed her every corner of his land, sharing his dreams of expanding the herd, building a new barn, maybe raising horses as well as cattle. "This land is everything to me," he said one afternoon as they sat by the creek, watching the water tumble over smooth stones. "I built it from nothing. Every fence post, every acre, I worked for it. You should be proud," Penelope said. "You have accomplished so much." He looked at her intently. "I am proud of the land. But lately, I have been thinking that a ranch is not much good without someone to share it with." Her breath caught. "Zachary, I am not saying anything you do not already know. I am in love with you, Penelope. I think I have been since the moment I heard about what you did, and every day since has just made me more certain." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I know we have not been courting long, but I am not a man who wastes time when I know what I want, and I want you. I want to marry you if you will have me." Penelope felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I love you too. I think I started falling in love with you when you filled my cupboard without asking for anything in return. When you saw I needed help and you just helped, no questions, no conditions. You have the best heart of anyone I have ever known. Then marry me," he said urgently, pulling her closer. "Say yes and make me the happiest man in Texas." "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Penelope felt something in her chest unfurl like a flower opening to the sun. She had spent so long just surviving, making do with whatever scraps life offered. But here, in Zachary's arms, she was not just surviving. She was living. They were married in Del Rio 3 weeks later, in the small church with Mrs. Henderson and half the town as witnesses. Penelope wore a new dress that Zachary had bought for her, pale blue with white lace at the collar. He wore his best suit, and when he looked at her as she walked down the aisle, his eyes held everything she needed to know. "I, Zachary Rains, take you, Penelope Dawson, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice strong and sure. "I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I will work hard to provide for you, protect you with everything I have, and make you happy if it is in my power to do so." Penelope spoke her own vows with tears streaming down her face, and when the preacher said they were husband and wife, Zachary kissed her like she was precious and rare. They rode back to the ranch together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Zachary lifted her down from the wagon, and instead of setting her on her feet, he carried her across the threshold of their home. "Welcome home, Mrs. Raines," he said, and Penelope wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him. Their first months of marriage were blissfully happy. Penelope had never known such contentment. She woke each morning beside her husband, cooked their meals, worked in the garden, and spent long evenings sitting with him on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. Zachary was a devoted husband, attentive and affectionate, always finding little ways to show his love. He brought her wildflowers he picked while checking the fence line. He built her a better chicken coop because she mentioned the old one was drafty. He held her at night like she was something precious. In November, Manuel and Jose returned to help with moving the cattle to winter pasture. They were both good men, respectful and hardworking, and they treated Penelope with courteous deference. She cooked large meals for them, and they ate together at the big kitchen table, talking in a mixture of English and Spanish. Jose was married with 4 children back in Mexico, and Manuel was courting a girl from Del Rio. They both seemed genuinely happy that Zachary had married. "He is a different man now," Manuel told her one evening, speaking in careful English. "Before, he was always serious, always working. Now he smiles. You are good for him, Senora." "He is good for me too," Penelope said warmly. Winter came, mild by Missouri standards, but cold enough to require warm blankets and a fire in the evenings. Penelope and Zachary spent those long nights by the fireplace. Her leaning against his chest, while he read aloud from the books they borrowed from the traveling library that came through Del Rio once a month. Sometimes they just talked, sharing stories from their childhoods, making plans for the future. "I want children," Zachary said one night, his hand resting on her stomach. "A whole houseful if we are blessed. I want to teach my sons to work the ranch and my daughters to be as strong and kind as their mother." "I want that too," Penelope said softly. "I want to fill this house with love and laughter. I want to give our children everything we did not have." "They will have us," Zachary said. "That is more than either of us had at their age. That is everything." In January, Penelope realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week to be sure, then told Zachary over breakfast. He stared at her for a moment, then let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "We are going to have a baby," he said wonderingly, setting her down gently. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be." "I will need to see the doctor, but yes, I believe so." Zachary knelt in front of her, placing both hands on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father speaking. I am going to love you more than you can imagine, and your mother is going to be the best mother any child ever had." Penelope ran her fingers through his dark hair, overwhelmed with love for this man who had come into her life like an unexpected blessing. "We are going to be a family." "We already are a family," Zachary said, looking up at her. "We have been since the moment you said yes." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Penelope felt well except for some morning queasiness that passed after the first few months. Zachary was ridiculously protective, trying to stop her from doing any heavy work, but she laughed at him and continued her normal routine. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time while doing much harder work than this. I am fine." But she loved his concern, loved the way he fretted over her, the way he talked to her belly every night before they went to sleep. She loved watching him build a cradle in the evenings, his hands careful and precise as he sanded the wood smooth. She loved the way his face lit up the first time he felt the baby kick, his palm pressed against her swollen stomach, his expression one of pure wonder. "That is our child in there," he said, awed. "Our baby." "Yes," Penelope said, covering his hand with hers. "Our baby." In late August, a year after they had first met, Penelope went into labor. Zachary rode to Del Rio for the doctor and Mrs. Henderson, who had delivered half the babies in town. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when Penelope thought she could not bear it anymore. But Zachary stayed beside her the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, whispering encouragement. "You can do this," he said over and over. "You are the strongest person I know. Just a little longer, my love, just hold on." When their son finally entered the world, wailing his displeasure at the bright, cold air, Penelope sobbed with relief and joy. Mrs. Henderson cleaned him quickly and placed him in her arms, and Penelope looked down at the tiny, red-faced infant with wonder. "He is perfect," she whispered. Zachary sat beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, staring at their son with an expression of absolute devotion. "He is beautiful. You are amazing. I love you so much." They named him Daniel after Penelope's father. He was a healthy baby with dark hair like his father and blue eyes that would eventually turn gray. Zachary was a natural father, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Daniel at night when he fussed, singing off-key lullabies that somehow always worked. Penelope watched her husband with their son and fell in love with him all over again. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Daniel grew into a sturdy toddler, then a curious little boy who followed his father everywhere, chattering constantly and asking a million questions. When Daniel was 2, Penelope had a daughter they named Elizabeth, with blonde hair and her mother's compassionate nature. 2 years after that came another boy, Samuel, who was adventurous and fearless from birth. The ranch prospered. Zachary expanded the herd and began breeding horses as he had always wanted. Manuel and Jose became permanent employees, building their own small houses on the property and bringing their families to join them. The ranch became a community, with children running between the houses, shared meals, and helping hands always available when needed. Penelope's life was full in ways she had never imagined possible. She tended her large garden, canned vegetables for winter, sewed clothes for her growing children, and managed the household with capable efficiency. But more than the work, she treasured the quiet moments, reading stories to her children before bed, sitting on the porch with Zachary after the children were asleep, riding out to the creek on Sunday afternoons for family picnics. One evening, when Daniel was 6 and Elizabeth 4 and Samuel 2, Penelope stood at the stove making supper while her children played on the floor behind her. Zachary came in from the barn, sweaty and dusty from a day's work. He kissed the back of her neck and looked over her shoulder at what she was cooking. "Smells good. What can I do to help? You can wash up and then keep these 3 from destroying the kitchen before supper is ready." He laughed and scooped up Samuel, who squealed with delight. "Come on, little man. Let us go get cleaned up and leave Mama to her cooking." Watching him walk away with their son on his hip, Daniel and Elizabeth trailing after him like ducklings, Penelope felt her throat tighten with emotion. This life, this family, this love, it had all started with one act of kindness, one choice to help strangers even when she had nothing to spare. After supper, when the children were in bed and she and Zachary sat together on the porch watching the stars come out, she said, "Do you ever think about that night we met, about Catherine Miller and her children?" "Sometimes," Zachary said, his arm around her shoulders. "I think about how close I came to never meeting you. If I had not run into them on the road, if Catherine had not told me about you, I might have lived my whole life without knowing you existed. I think about that too. And I think about how empty my cupboard was that night, how I had nothing left. But I gave it anyway, and then you came and filled it back up. You have been filling it ever since, not just with food but with love and family and everything I ever wanted." Zachary turned her face toward him, his expression tender. "You filled my life too, Penelope. Before you, I had land and cattle and a house, but I did not have a home. I did not have someone to work for, to dream with, to build a future with. You gave me all of that. You gave me everything that matters." She kissed him, soft and sweet, tasting the coffee on his lips and the love in his touch. "We gave it to each other." "Yes," he agreed. "We did." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds, crickets chirping, cattle lowing in the distance, the wind rustling through the oak trees. Inside the house, their children slept safely in their beds. The cupboards were full, the pantry stocked, the future bright with promise. Penelope thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago, alone, struggling, with nothing but her determination to keep her going. She thought about how one act of compassion had changed everything, had brought her to this moment, this life, this love. She had emptied her cupboard for strangers, never expecting anything in return, just doing what her heart told her was right. And Zachary had filled it back up without a word, without asking for thanks or recognition, just quietly meeting her need. That was love, she realized. Not the grand gestures or dramatic declarations, though those had their place. But real love was in the everyday kindnesses, the quiet support, the way Zachary noticed what she needed and provided it without being asked. The way he had been doing since the very first night they met. "I love you," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "I love you too," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "Always have, always will." The years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Daniel grew tall and serious, showing early signs of becoming a natural rancher like his father. He learned to ride almost before he could walk properly, and by the time he was 8, he was helping Zachary with real work, not just childish chores. Elizabeth was gentle and kind, nursing injured birds back to health, and helping her mother in the garden with patient dedication. Samuel was the wild one, always climbing things he should not and coming home covered in mud and scratches, but with such an infectious grin that no one could stay angry with him for long. When Daniel was 9, Penelope had another child, a daughter they named Grace. She was a quiet baby, content to watch the world with solemn dark eyes. Zachary doted on her, calling her his little princess and carrying her around the ranch while he worked, narrating everything he was doing in a soft voice. "That is a fence post, Gracie. Keeps the cattle where they belong. And that there is a mesquite tree, ugly but tough, just like your daddy." He would grin when he said things like that, and Penelope would shake her head and smile. The ranch continued to expand. Zachary bought more land from a neighbor who was retiring and moving back east. He built a new barn, larger and better than the old one. He experimented with breeding different strains of horses, developing a reputation for producing animals that were both strong and gentle, perfect for family use. People came from as far as San Antonio to buy his horses. Money was no longer the constant worry it had been in their early years. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, with enough to meet their needs and save for the future. Penelope sometimes thought about her younger self, scraping by on laundry money and counting every penny, and marveled at how far they had come. But she never forgot where she had started. When travelers passed through their land, she always offered food and water. When neighbors fell on hard times, she brought over meals and offered help. She taught her children to be generous, to see those in need and respond with compassion. "Why do we help people, Mama?" Elizabeth asked one day when she was 7, after they had taken food to a family whose father was injured and could not work. Penelope knelt down to her daughter's level. "Because that is what we are supposed to do, sweetheart. God gives us blessings not just for ourselves, but so we can share them with others. When we help people, we are showing them that they matter, that they are not alone. Like how Papa helped you, Elizabeth said, surprising her. Your father told you that story. He said you gave away all your food to help a family you did not even know, and then you had nothing left. So he brought you food because he thought you were the bravest, kindest person he had ever heard of, and then he fell in love with you. Penelope hugged her daughter close, blinking back tears. Yes, exactly like that. Your father saw that I needed help and he helped me, and that changed both of our lives. I want to be like you and Papa, Elizabeth said earnestly. I want to help people too. You already do, my darling. You already do. One autumn, when Daniel was 12, a family from Louisiana arrived at the ranch, desperate and worn. They had been traveling to California, lured by promises of gold and opportunity, but their wagon had broken down and they had no money to repair it. The father, a thin man with haunted eyes, explained that his wife was ill and they had 5 children to feed. Penelope looked at Zachary, and without speaking a word, they both knew what they were going to do. You can stay here while we fix your wagon, Zachary said. We have got room in the bunkhouse, and my wife will cook for you until your wife is feeling better. The man nearly wept with gratitude. His name was Henry Cooper, and his wife was Anne. Their children ranged from 14 to 4 years old, all skinny and scared. Penelope immediately set about making a large meal while Zachary and Daniel worked on repairing the wagon. Anne had a fever, much like Catherine Miller had years before. Penelope recognized the signs and knew exactly what to do. She set up Anne in a comfortable bed, gave her medicine and cool cloths, and sat with her through the night. By morning, the fever had broken. "Why are you doing this for us?" Anne whispered. "We are strangers. We have nothing to give you." Penelope smiled and squeezed her hand. "Someone once did the same for me. I am just passing it forward." The Cooper family stayed for 2 weeks while Anne recovered, and their wagon was repaired. Henry helped Zachary with ranch work in exchange for their hospitality, and his oldest son worked alongside Daniel. The children played together, and for those 2 weeks, the ranch was even more chaotic and loud than usual. When the Coopers were ready to leave, Henry tried to give Zachary what little money they had left, but Zachary refused. "You will need that for the rest of your journey. Just do me one favor. When you get where you are going and you are settled, if you see someone who needs help, you help them. That is all I ask." Henry shook Zachary's hand, his eyes wet. "I will, I promise. And if we ever make anything of ourselves in California, I will find a way to repay you." "No need," Zachary said. "Just live a good life and raise those children right. That is repayment enough." After the Coopers left, Penelope found Zachary sitting on the porch staring out at the sunset. She sat beside him and took his hand. "That was a good thing you did." "We did," he corrected. "You did most of the work." "We are a team," Penelope said, leaning against him. "We always have been." "Do you ever regret it?" Zachary asked suddenly. "This life, I mean. It is hard work and we are out here away from town. You could have married someone in Del Rio, had an easier life." Penelope looked at him in astonishment. "Regret it? Zachary Rains, I have never regretted a single moment of our life together. You and our children are everything to me. This ranch, this life we have built, it is more than I ever dreamed of having. Why would you even ask that?" "I just want you to be happy," he said quietly. "I want to make sure I am giving you everything you deserve." She cupped his face in her hands, making him look at her. "You have given me everything. You have given me love and partnership and a family. You have given me a home and security and more joy than I knew existed. I am happy, Zachary. Happier than I have any right to be." He kissed her then, deep and tender, and when they pulled apart, he was smiling. "Good. Because I plan on spending the rest of my life making you even happier." "That is a tall order," she teased. "I am up for the challenge." Time continued its steady march. The children grew and changed, each developing their own personalities and dreams. Daniel was steady and responsible, already talking about taking over the ranch someday. Elizabeth was compassionate and creative, talking about becoming a teacher. Samuel was adventurous and charming, announcing at age 10 that he was going to be a Texas Ranger. Grace was quiet but observant, always watching and learning, already showing signs of being the smartest of the bunch. When Daniel turned 16, Zachary sat him down for a serious talk. "This ranch will be yours someday, son. You and your brothers and sisters will inherit everything your mother and I have built, but I want to make sure it is what you want. If you have dreams that take you somewhere else, you should follow them. This ranch should not be a burden." Daniel looked surprised. "Why would I want to go anywhere else? This is my home. These are my roots. I want to work this land with you, Pa, and then I want to pass it on to my own children someday." Zachary gripped his son's shoulder, pride evident in his eyes. "Then we will work it together. I will teach you everything I know." "You already have been," Daniel said with a grin. "I have been paying attention." That night, Zachary held Penelope close in their bed. "Our son is going to be fine, better than fine. He is going to be a good man, a strong man." "He learned from the best," Penelope murmured sleepily. "He learned from both of us," Zachary said. "All our children have. They have your compassion and your kindness. Those are the things that will make them truly successful in life." Penelope thought about her children, each one unique but all of them sharing a common thread. They were kind. They noticed when others were hurting. They offered help without being asked. She and Zachary had raised them to be generous and compassionate, to see their blessings as opportunities to help others. It was the legacy she was most proud of. Years passed, and the children began to venture into their own lives. Daniel married a sweet girl named Emma from a neighboring ranch, and they built a small house on the eastern section of the property. Elizabeth went to San Antonio to attend a teaching college, writing letters home every week filled with enthusiasm for her studies. Samuel joined the Rangers as he had always dreamed, and though Penelope worried about him constantly, she was proud of his courage. Grace, at 15, was still at home, helping her mother and continuing her education through the books that traveled through Del Rio. She was in no hurry to leave, content in the world she knew. Zachary's hair began to show silver at the temples, and Penelope found a few gray strands in her own blonde hair. They were getting older, but their love remained as strong as ever. If anything, it had deepened with time, tempered by shared experiences and mutual respect. One evening, sitting on the same porch where they had spent countless nights over the years, Zachary said, "We have had a good life, have we not?" "The best," Penelope agreed. "I have been thinking about how it all started. About that night I met the Millers and they told me about you. About how I went to town and bought supplies and brought them to your house, not even sure if you would accept them." "I almost did not," Penelope admitted. "I was so proud, so determined to do everything myself, but you did not make it feel like charity. You made it feel like kindness." "It was kindness," Zachary said. "The same kindness you showed to strangers even when it cost you everything. You inspired me, Penelope. You inspired me to be a better man. And you saved me," she said softly, "not just by bringing me food but by seeing me, by valuing what I had done instead of judging me for being poor and alone. You treated me like I mattered. You did matter. You do matter. You have always mattered more than anything else in this world." She kissed him, her hand resting on his weathered cheek. "I love you, Zachary Rains. I have loved you from the moment you filled my cupboard without asking for anything in return, and I will love you until the day I die." "Then I am the luckiest man who ever lived," he said. They sat together as the stars came out, one by one, filling the vast Texas sky with light. Inside the house, Grace was probably reading by lamplight, lost in one of her books. Across the property, Daniel and Emma were likely putting their own children to bed. Penelope and Zachary had 3 grandchildren now, with another on the way. Somewhere out there, Elizabeth was teaching children their letters, and Samuel was keeping people safe. It was a good legacy, Penelope thought. A family built on love and kindness, spreading out into the world like ripples in a pond. It had all started with one simple choice: to help someone in need, even when it seemed impossible. And that choice had brought her everything she had ever wanted. The ranch prospered year after year. Daniel proved to be an excellent rancher, implementing new ideas while respecting the foundation his father had built. Emma was a wonderful addition to the family, warm and hardworking, and their children, 2 boys and a girl, filled the ranch with energy and laughter. Elizabeth married a lawyer in San Antonio, a kind man who supported her work as a teacher. They had twin daughters who visited the ranch every summer, falling in love with the land and animals just as their mother had as a child. Samuel wrote letters from all over Texas, describing his adventures with the Rangers. He was making a difference, protecting people who could not protect themselves, and Penelope prayed for his safety every single night. Grace, at 20, met a young veterinarian who had come to Del Rio to set up a practice. He was intelligent and gentle, and he looked at Grace like she hung the moon. When he asked for her hand in marriage, Zachary gave his blessing, though Penelope could see it was hard for him to let his youngest daughter go. "She is not going far," Penelope reminded him. "They will be right in Del Rio. We will see her all the time." "I know," Zachary said, "but she is my baby girl. It is hard to watch her grow up." "They all grew up," Penelope said gently, "and we did a good job raising them. Look at how they turned out." Zachary pulled her close. "We did do a good job, did we not? 4 children, all of them good people. All of them making the world better just by being in it." "Because they learned from you," Penelope said. "From us," he corrected, as he always did. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration at the ranch. All 4 of them came home, bringing spouses and children, and the house was filled with noise and love and chaos. They had a huge meal, with neighbors and friends joining in, and someone brought a fiddle, and there was dancing in the yard. Zachary led Penelope in a slow dance while everyone watched and clapped. He was not as quick as he had been in his youth. His knees troubled him sometimes now, but he was still strong and steady. Penelope rested her head on his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and sure as always. 25 years, she murmured. How did it go so fast? I do not know, but I would not change a single moment, Zachary said. Daniel stood up to make a toast, holding his glass high. To my parents who showed us all what real love looks like. Pa, you taught me how to work hard, how to care for the land, how to be a man of integrity. Ma, you taught me compassion and kindness and the importance of helping others. Together, you taught us what it means to be a family. We love you both, and we are grateful every day that we get to be your children. Everyone cheered and drank, and Penelope had to wipe away tears. Elizabeth spoke next, talking about how her mother had inspired her to become a teacher, to pass on knowledge and kindness to the next generation. Samuel read a letter he had written, since his work kept him away, talking about how his father's example of integrity guided him every day in his work with the Rangers. Grace simply hugged them both and whispered, "Thank you for everything." That night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Penelope and Zachary sat on their porch one more time. The moon was full, casting silver light over the land they had worked for a quarter century. When I met you, I had nothing, Penelope said. An empty cupboard, a few coins, and a heart that was starting to forget how to hope. And when I met you, I had land and cattle and money, but I was alone, Zachary replied. I had no one to share it with, no reason to build anything beyond just surviving. We filled each other's emptiness, Penelope said. Yes, Zachary agreed. You gave me a reason to build a future. I gave you the security to be the generous, kind person you always were. We made each other whole. Penelope thought about that long-ago night when she had opened her door to find desperate strangers on her porch. She thought about how she had given everything she had without hesitation, never imagining what would come of that choice. And she thought about Zachary, riding up to her house with a mule loaded with supplies, quietly and efficiently meeting her need without asking for anything in return. That was the moment their story really began. Not with grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but with simple kindness meeting simple kindness. She had emptied her cupboard for strangers, and he had filled it back up without a word. And in doing so, they had found each other. The years continued to be kind to them. They grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces weathering with time and sun. But they were healthy and active, still working the ranch alongside Daniel, still hosting family dinners every Sunday, still sitting on their porch in the evenings to watch the sun set. They became grandparents many times over, each grandchild bringing fresh joy into their lives. They passed on their stories, teaching the next generation about kindness and generosity and the importance of helping others. When Penelope was 62, she received a letter that made her cry. It was from Catherine Miller, the woman she had helped so many years ago. Catherine had tracked her down through church records, wanting to reach out after all this time. The letter told of how Catherine and her children had made it safely to San Antonio, how her brother had helped them rebuild their lives. Her children had all grown into successful adults. Thomas was a doctor, Mary was a teacher, and Sarah ran a boarding house. Catherine wrote that she had never forgotten the woman who saved their lives, who gave them everything when she had nothing. I wanted you to know that your kindness changed everything for us, Catherine wrote. My children grew up knowing what real compassion looks like because of you. They have passed that lesson on to their own children. You started a ripple of goodness that is still spreading. Thank you for seeing us when we were invisible to everyone else. Thank you for caring when you had every reason not to. You saved our lives, and I will be grateful until the day I die. Penelope showed the letter to Zachary, who read it with moist eyes. See, he said, this is what I saw in you from the very beginning, this heart that gives without counting the cost. I only did what anyone should do, Penelope said, though she was deeply moved by Catherine's words. No, Zachary said firmly. You did what you should do, what a good person should do, but most people do not. That is why you are special. That is why I fell in love with you. They wrote back to Catherine, and thus began a correspondence that would last for years. Catherine eventually came to visit, and it was a joyful reunion. She was an older woman now, but still recognizable, and she hugged Penelope for a long time. You are my hero, Catherine said simply. You always will be. Penelope introduced Catherine to her family, and Catherine met all 4 of her children and the growing number of grandchildren. She told them the story of that desperate night, how their mother had saved her family with nothing but compassion and her last scraps of food. Your mother is the finest person I have ever known, Catherine told them, and your father is a close second, for seeing her worth and honoring it. You are blessed to come from such people. After Catherine left, Daniel said to his mother, I never knew the whole story before. I knew you had helped the Millers, and that is how you met Pa, but I did not realize you had given them everything, that you had nothing left. I could not let them suffer when I had the power to help, Penelope said simply. And Pa could not let you suffer when he had the power to help, Daniel said. You are both remarkable. As Penelope and Zachary entered their 70s, they began to slow down. The ranch was fully in Daniel's capable hands now, though Zachary still rode out most days to check on things and offer advice. Penelope still cooked and tended her garden, though she needed more rest than she once had, but their love remained constant. If anything, it had grown deeper with the years, a comfortable, abiding presence that needed no words. They could sit together in silence and be perfectly content. They could communicate with a glance across a crowded room. They knew each other's thoughts and feelings as well as their own. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard, Zachary took Penelope's hand. His grip was not as strong as it once was. His fingers gnarled with arthritis, but it was warm and familiar. I have been thinking about something, he said. What is that? About how one choice can change everything. You chose to help the Millers, even though it cost you everything you had. And I chose to help you, even though you were a stranger. And those two choices led to this. He gestured at the yard, at the children playing, at the prosperous ranch spread out before them. They led to 50 years of happiness, to 4 children and a dozen grandchildren, and who knows how many great-grandchildren. They led to a lifetime of love. Penelope squeezed his hand. I think about that too, about how close we came to never meeting, about how different my life would have been if I had not opened my door that night, or if you had not met the Millers on the road. But we did, Zachary said, and everything that came after was just as it should be. Yes, Penelope agreed, just as it should be. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and orange and pink. The children's laughter rang out across the yard, bright and joyful. Inside the house, several generations of their family were preparing supper together, their voices blending in cheerful conversation. Penelope thought about her life, about the journey that had brought her from desperate poverty to this moment of complete contentment. She had learned that kindness was never wasted, that giving without expecting return was its own reward. She had learned that love was not about grand gestures, but about quiet, consistent devotion. She had learned that home was not a place but people, and family was built through choice as much as through blood. And she had learned that sometimes, when you empty your cupboard for a stranger's sake, the universe finds a way to fill it back up again. Sometimes it sends you a cowboy who sees your worth and honors it. Sometimes it sends you a partner who will walk beside you through every joy and sorrow. Sometimes it sends you a love that will last a lifetime and beyond. I love you, she said, turning to Zachary. He smiled, the same smile that had captured her heart 50 years ago. I love you too. Always have, always will. The sun set, and the stars began to emerge one by one, filling the vast Texas sky. Another day was ending, another chapter closing, but their story continued. It would continue in their children and grandchildren, in the values they had passed on, in the kindness they had shown and taught others to show. It was a good story, Penelope thought. A story that began with compassion and grew into love. A story about 2 people who found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. A story about emptying and filling, giving and receiving, losing and finding. It was their story, and it was perfect.